Hello, everyone. If you remember when we were learning halachot of Mincha and Marv and even a little bit Chachris, we were told that there's a rabbinical prohibition of doing melacha, labor, or work, and also eating a meal with bread before those prayers. With Shachrit, maybe it wasn't. Um, that's serious in terms of melacha because we said that some people get up before dawn and can't even daven at that time. But in terms of eating, we said that there was a separate prohibition about shachris than the rest of the prayers because there's a learning from lo tochlu al adam, don't eat before you pray for your blood, and so we said that there's some kulas on Shabbat and Yom Tov and otherwise, but anyway, on Friday the prohibition to eat and to do labor is because once Shabbat comes in terms of the meal, it will mean that you won't be that hungry for the Shabbat meal, which is very special. And in terms of labor, you might be Mechal Shabbos because you can't stop in the middle or something like that. So we'll bring some practical advice on those two issues. So on Friday, one is meant to be preparing for Shabbat. Sages forbade sitting down to an unusually large meal on Friday because doing so would spoil one's appetite for Friday night dinner. It also would be disrespectful toward Shabbat since it would make it seem like Shabbat meals and weekday meals are no different from one another. That's what the Pri Megadim says. Furthermore, it is possible that dealing with a large meal would get in the way of necessary Shabbat preparations. Even a Sudat mitzvah, a ceremonial festive meal associated with a mitzvah, such as a Siyum Masechet, may not be planned for Friday. However, before midday, one may have a regular meal to celebrate a Siyum. And so, since the rabbi wrote this, it's become very, very popular in Israel, especially, to have weddings and bar mitzvahs on Friday morning. Um, and so, in terms of weddings on Friday, if it's before midday, like we said, there's not a problem. But going into the problem of Shabbat preparations, we're assuming that the majority of the people that are coming are also going to stay for Shabbat and have the continued meals and celebrations. So, like, let's say it's in a hotel or in a place where there's hospitality, like a kibbutz. That's not such a problem. In fact, about 5 years ago, my cousin said he called me from Israel and he lives in Canada, and he said, "I'm at the wedding." I said, "A wedding at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday?" He says, "Yeah, afterwards we're going to have a pool party." So they were at some kibbutz in Israel, and so it's not exactly the most proper thing to do, but if you don't have to prepare for Shabbat because all the meals are already prepared by somebody else, then that's where I would go with that. Talmud tells of a family that lived in Jerusalem and hosted elaborate meals on Friday. Because of this sin, they first became impoverished and then died out. We're not trying to give that as a warning or anything. It's just that the rabbis took this idea very, very seriously. When there is a Sudat mitzvah that must take place at a specific time, such as a circumcision on the 8th day or a pidyon haben on the 30th day of the month, since the baby was born, it may be held on Friday. Since the Torah designates a time for them, it is a mitzvah to serve a big meal, and this does not desecrate or detract from the honor of Shabbat. Nevertheless, it is proper to hold these celebrations before midday, both so as not to disrupt Shabbat preparations and so as not to spoil people's appetite for the Friday night meal, because usually at a bris or pidyon ben, people don't stay for Shabbat, and so that we'll just go to the next chapter because this will clarify a few more things about this. So the prohibition of doing melacha on Friday. So obviously Rabbi Melamed realizes, especially outside of Israel, that we have to work a 5-day work week. So since we don't have Sunday, um, so the sages prohibit working on Friday afternoon, informing us that work undertaken then will not be blessed with success. The same wording, by the way, is said about Tisha B'Av and about Chol Hamoed. The prohibition goes into effect at Mincha Ketana, which is 2.5 seasonal hours before sunset, so the halachic hours. Right now in Fredericton, a sha'az manit is 67 minutes, so an hour and 7 minutes. So an hour and seven plus 1.5 is about 2.5 hours, a little bit more than 2.5 hours. There is a more stringent opinion that maintains that the prohibition goes into effect earlier with the onset of Mincha Gedolah, which is half hour, halachic hour after midday. But since this is a rabbinic prohibition, one may rely, on the more lenient opinion and work until the later time. Even if one has finished all of his Shabbat preparations, he may not work during this time because it is disrespectful toward Shabbat for one to work on something unconnected to Shabbat, so close to Shabbat. So let's try to focus on work outside of the house. Work inside of the house, obviously, if everything is ready and you're just typing emails on your computer, I think that you could stop later. That's just my opinion, and that's how we are doing in our house as Shandy works from home. But I just wanted to add that because, but coming from outside, Shandy actually told me an unbelievable story where there was a snowstorm and she was stuck on the 401 and it took a very long time to get home. And so, and thank God some of the preparations were already done. But about this, Rabbi Melamed says the following. The sages specifically forbade regular work during those hours, but permitted ad hoc work. Therefore, at this time, one may not engage in carpentry, tailoring, electrical work, large gardening projects, computer work, writing a Torah scroll or mezuzah, or editing books for pay, because these are all forms of regular work, and they're all listed about Mincha and Mariv, and very soon we're going to talk about them for the laws of Chanukah. The same idea, half an hour before lighting the candles of Chanukah, we're not allowed to do melacha, but we'll get into that closer to the date. An expert may, however, do something quick like set up a trap to catch animals, soak dye, producing materials in water, because that's something that you don't touch on Shabbat and it just continues working on Shabbat. The same, I think, with pickles, or set a computer to carry out a complex operation, all of which are ad hoc types of work. Similarly, one may water the lawn, clean a room, sew buttons, do the laundry in the machine, or write Torah thoughts by hand on a computer, as these tasks do not require expertise. So because of all this idea of work, we're just going to talk about the driving. There are two additional cases in which the sages allow people to undertake regular work on Friday afternoon. A poor person who does not have enough money to buy Shabbat necessities may continue to work then, and anyone may work then in order to avoid damage or loss, just like we rule on Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of the holiday. Thus, a craftsman may finish his work if there is possibility that if he does not finish it, he will lose customers. Similarly, one may do on Friday afternoon everything that one may do on Chol HaMoed, like we just said. According to many authorities, commerce, which means traveling, is not included in the prohibition of work, so stores may remain, traveling and buying and selling. So stores may remain open late on Friday. Nevertheless, stores should be closed at least half an hour before Shabbat begins in order to leave time to wash and get dressed for Shabbat. Nowadays, we are customarily more stringent and close shops a few hours before Shabbat. Only stores that sell Shabbat necessities stay open late. And those who are going away for Shabbat must plan their trip so that they will arrive at their destination at least half an hour before the start of Shabbat. So candlelighting, this way they will be able to organize things for Shabbat when they arrive. If they are taking a long trip, they must take into account possible delays on the way, like I said about Shendi. Rabbi Baruch Eliyahu, the former chief rabbi of Israel before he died, advised allowing for double the normal travel time, which I think is a great idea. So if a trip normally takes 2 hours, one should leave home 4 hours before Shabbat. And the official bus lines today in Israel stop almost an hour before Shabbat. The ones that are in the city a little bit less time than that. But just because the bus usually gets from Bnei Brak to Jerusalem in 45 minutes doesn't mean that you can rely on it, especially on Friday when there is so much traffic in Israel. So I think that this is a very, very good way to end this chapter, and then we'll tomorrow we'll finish the chapter of preparation for Shabbat. Thank you for joining.